Well, good morning, everyone. All right, first of all, I want to thank Admiral Hahn for the opportunity for Pacific Command to say a few words here at this conference. And unfortunately, Admiral Harris cannot be here. He had a scheduled conflict, so he'd asked me to attend in his place. And the reason why he wanted to have some representation here at this conference is because of the support that he has received from Admiral Hahn throughout my tenure there, and certainly well before that as well. In addition to that, to get a perspective from Pacific Command, as many of you know, the command relationships within the Pacific, my boss, Admiral Harris, is the Joint Force Commander. He is in charge of all the forces in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region, those forces that are assigned to him. And Admiral Scott Swift is the JFMC, or the Joint Force Maritime Component Commander, who provides that capability to my commander. As Walter has stated, as the J8 at Pacific Command and serving Admiral Harris, I have about 5 different mission areas. Those mission areas include the definition of the requirements from the command, and I'll say a few words about that when I talk about the integrated priorities list, and when we write our joint urgent operational need statements, as well as our joint emergent operational need statements, we call the JUONs and the GEONs. We're also responsible for the advocacy of capabilities that we need within the command, and we do that through the 3-star program reviews, as well as what we call the DMAGs, with the Vice Chairman as well as with the Deputy Secretary of Defense. We're also responsible for science and technology within US PACOM. And ONR Global has been very kind in providing to PACOM a billet, and that person serves 2 functions. The first one is as the S&T advisor for the entire command and as the S&T advisor to the commander, and he is also the S&T division chief within our Resources and Assessment Directorate. We also have a Joint Innovation and Experimentation Division, and that JI&E function is almost 100% reimbursable. So it is pay as you go. We have a lot of industry partners who participate in our exercises. We actually inject experiments during our major exercises, such as Northern Edge. Recently concluded about 26 different experiments that we tried during Northern Edge. We're also responsible for assessing how we're doing in achieving our objectives, our theater objectives. And finally, as you would expect, as with most J8 organizations, we're responsible for the financial management, if you will, of the command, and that stretches across the entire PPBE process, the planning, the programming, the budgeting, and the execution. So as a part of the execution, we have the Comptroller Division comprised of about 16 accountants. All right, so with that, what I'd like to do is give you a very broad overview of what it is that we have in our area of responsibility in the way of characteristics and challenges. Next slide, please. Okay, and go ahead and do the first build, if you could. All right, so this shows the size of our AOR. Next slide. Next slide. Next build, please. Okay, characteristics and challenges. Over half the Earth's surface. It's a big AOR. It's the biggest AOR, as a matter of fact. 3 of the most populous countries. So we have over half the Earth's population in 3 of the most populous countries in the world. In addition to that, we have 36 nations, 14 time zones. Next slide. When we look at the economies and the militaries that are in our area of responsibility, 7 of the 10 largest militaries, right? There's China, United States, India, North Korea, Russia, South Korea, and Vietnam. We also have 3 of the largest economies, and we all know what those economies are, the United States, China, and Japan. We also have the world's 5 smallest economies within our AOR as well. It's a very diverse region. and 5 of the 7 mutual defense treaties. So if I were to walk around the AOR, we have a treaty with Japan, as well as Korea, the Philippines, Australia, and into Thailand. Next. What I want to do is focus your attention on some of the challenges that we have within this AOR. Historic animosities are very important. In addition to that, we have unresolved wars, such as on the Korean Peninsula, separatist movements, such as in the Philippines. We have territorial disputes, as seen in the South China Sea, and we also see a lot of religious conflict. And if you've been paying attention to the news recently, there are 2 challenges that have been ongoing. The first one is with North Korea, and the second is with China. Next slide, please. We're watching North Korea very closely, obviously because of their nuclear weapons testing. And in addition to that, the development of their missiles to include intercontinental ballistic missiles. And many of you are familiar with the cyber war campaign that the North Koreans have been executing, as evidenced by the Sony hacking. What I'd like to do is say a few words about China. And the reason why is because the technological comparative advantage that this country has enjoyed for decades, since World War II. And the direct relationship between the prosperity of this country as well as its military might is tied to the technological superiority, the preeminence that we have. As mentioned yesterday by several of the speakers, Mary Miller talking about the rapid changes that are occurring and watching that comparative advantage slowly erode is very disconcerting for us at Pacific Command. China spends billions of dollars trying to buy our technology and using that technology to modernize their own military. So those are concerns for us. But as Dr. Magnus had mentioned yesterday, there's a trade-off between sharing information and trying to protect that information. And how do you strike that right balance? How do you share the information so that there's a synergism that's created by engineers like all of us who can use that information to continue to advance our technologies while at the same time not providing that non-recurring engineering to a potential adversary? And that's one of the concerns that my commander certainly has. There was a question that was asked yesterday about hypersonics. And certainly with all the work that we've been doing in the area of hypersonics, it's been very disturbing to see a lot of that information actually show up on another country's systems. Next slide. So this is the meat of my presentation. I'll say a few words about this, and hopefully that'll generate some of the questions that you might have. For those of you who know me, I like to answer questions as opposed to stand on a stage and provide information one way. It also gives me a sense of not only on what's on your mind, but the things that are important to you as well. So the role of science and technology in supporting the joint warfighter. In a nutshell, for us at Pacific Command, it's enabling us to fight and win tomorrow's wars. Very short and succinct. As mentioned previously, I'd like to address the requirements that we have at Pacific Command, but I'll do that at an unclassified level. So we developed the integrated priorities list, as I had alluded to earlier, and the IPL is informed by our plans. So there's a direct relationship between the plans that we have and the ensuing capabilities gaps that we generate or identify as a result of the capabilities that we have today and what we lack. And it's very important for me to share those capability gaps, not only across the Department of Defense, but particularly with our industry partners. During the Science Advisor panel discussion yesterday, Ross Wilhelm, the PAC Fleet Science Advisor, had mentioned what we call a POST, or a Pacific Operational Science and Technology conference that we hold in Hawaii. During that POST, I'll get on the stage and I will address each and every major capability gap that Pacific Command has, and I will not leave the stage until every question has been answered. So if you're an industry partner and you attend the conference and you want to know what capability that you're developing might be applied to a capability gap that we have in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region, I will help articulate and help make that connection for you. And I've been around long enough to know that the incredibly intelligent folks that we have in our industry partners, all with the right intentions to do the right thing for this country and close those capability gaps to ensure that our military remains preeminent on this planet, is something that we hold important, and thus we're going to try to help you get there as well. But in addition to the IPL, we also author the Joint Urgent Operational Needs Statements. So whereas the IPL covers the Future Years Defense Program, so in this case, FY19 to FY23, the Joint Urgent Operational Needs Statements and the Joint Emergent Operational Needs Statements fill that gap between today and about 2 years to 3 years out. The difference between a JUONS and a GEONS is that if there's imminent loss of life, then it becomes a JUONS. On the other hand, if it's something that industry partners or the services can work on over the next 2 years, then we articulate that in the way of a GEONS. So that's how the two of those differ. We also help craft the posture statements that are submitted by our commander, and we also help prep Admiral Harris during his congressional testimony in the way of the capabilities that we need to have. They go into separate sessions when they have the classified discussions. I had a very interesting meeting with Mary Miller several months ago, and it had to do with shaping the service acquisition communities, the SysComs, if you will. And heretofore, whereas we've had a very strong relationship, by we, I mean United States Pacific Command, with the S&T community writ large, we really don't have that type of strong relationship with the acquisition community. In other words, shaping the P-cubed-I of the current programs of record. And when you look at the amount of resources that are applied to the P-cubed-I, in my view, this is very fertile ground to help inform the acquisitioners out there what the most important capabilities are, and if there are improvements that are thought about, then we can have that discussion with the program managers. And that's something that I'm trying to take on as much as I possibly can. It's something that I've been working on now since about the 10 years that I've been since I've been the J8 at Pacific Command, and it's been a little bit tough trying to shape that community, but nonetheless, that's something that we're trying to do. And so at the very top level, what types of capabilities do we need to have? And this shouldn't come as a surprise to you, because we've already heard this from the CNO. We've heard this from General Walsh, and a lot of it has to do with the joint capabilities that we might be lacking today. In other words, how will we complete that kill chain from a joint perspective as opposed to a single service? So capabilities like command and control are very important to my commander. Comms, space, both from an offensive and a defensive side, integrated air and missile defense, and cyber. Now, these are capabilities that everybody, every service owns, and yet no one is responsible for it, right? We all need to have electronic warfare, yet who is the lead service for all electronic warfare? And there isn't one. So these are the exact types of capabilities that you'll see in our integrated priority list. And I'll say a few words about how you can get access to that information as well. Next slide. So the way that we've been working on trying to disseminate this information, I've been leveraging the Defense Technical Information Center, or DTEC. I'm actually the president of the User Council for DTEC, and trying to shape how we can better inform you of what our requirements are. So we do have a web page on DTEC, but more importantly, we have what we call a DTEC reading room. And the reason why we have a DTEC reading room is because many of our industry partners will have a security, or will have access to security information, but we've learned that they don't have ready access to the SIPR net. So we've physically created a reading room at Fort Belvoir at DTEC, and the purpose of this reading room is to enable you to read what our capability gaps are at Pacific Command. In fact, several of the other combatant commands have followed suit as well, so that information is available if provided by the combatant commands. I alluded to the post earlier, the Pacific Operational Science and Technology Conference, and not intended to be a shameless plug, and it is difficult to get out to Hawaii, but I would also offer to Admiral Hahn and to ONR that if you wanted to have a separate meeting in Hawaii, because that's where we bring together all of the folks, military as well as our industry partners, scattered throughout this region to all come together in Honolulu, and we can make a venue available to ONR to take advantage of that as well. And Mike Jones is currently our Science and Technology Advisor for the Command, our STA. He will be replaced by Cynthia Holland, and she's in the process of transitioning as the S&T Advisor for the Command, and both of them attend the annual Science and Engineering Technology Conference.